Russian oil tankers are burning in the Sea of Azov. Oil facilities deep inside Russia are under attack. And just as Ukraine intensifies its campaign against Putin's fuel network, President Donald Trump has opened the door for Kyiv to manufacture American Patriot interceptors. This is not one isolated strike. It is a two-front strategy. Hit the fuel that keeps Russia's war machine moving, while building the air defenses Ukraine needs to survive Moscow's retaliation. Subscribe for verified updates from the Russia-Ukraine war. And tell us in the comments, is this a turning point or the start of an even more dangerous escalation? The question is, what exactly did Ukraine hit, and why does it matter? Ukrainian drones struck Russian oil infrastructure and set 2 tankers ablaze in the Sea of Azov. Fires were also reported at energy facilities in Tver, Stavropol, and Rostov. These were strategic targets. Tankers, ports, refineries, and depots move Russian fuel, generate revenue, and support military operations. Every disruption adds cost, delay, and uncertainty. The Armada headline reflects a wider campaign against Russian-linked shipping. Ukrainian sources claim naval drones struck at least 12 vessels in one operation and dozens across several days. Those larger totals remain unconfirmed claims. But the confirmed picture is already significant. 2 tankers burning, multiple energy sites attacked, and fresh pressure on a fuel system Russia is struggling to protect across its territory. The question is why Ukraine is focusing so heavily on oil. The answer reveals Kyiv's larger strategy, and it is more ambitious than one night of drone strikes. Here is what many people miss. A tanker does not need to sink for an attack to produce real consequences. A damaged vessel can leave service. Shipping becomes riskier, insurance rises, repairs take time, and ports demand more protection. Russia may also move air defenses away from other locations. That creates a strategic problem for Moscow. Russia stretches across 11 time zones. Ukraine does not need to destroy every refinery, depot, or ship. It only needs to prove that enough of them remain vulnerable. Every successful strike forces the Kremlin to make another choice. Which facility gets protection? Which port remains exposed? Which air defense battery stays near the front? And which one is moved hundreds of miles away to defend an oil terminal? Reports describe fuel pressure in Russian-controlled Crimea and elsewhere. Moscow says it intercepted many Ukrainian drones, but those figures cannot always be independently verified. Still, repeated reports of fires show that some drones are getting through. That is the central danger for the Kremlin. Ukraine can launch relatively expendable systems against a huge map of valuable targets. Russia must try to defend them all. But every strike also creates a risk for Ukraine because Moscow can answer with larger missile and drone attacks against Ukrainian cities. And that is where the Patriot decision becomes critical. Now comes the political shock. After talks involving President Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine said it had reached a political-level agreement with the United States on licenses connected to Patriot interceptor production. That wording matters. This does not mean immediate mass production or thousands of missiles. It concerns permission and licensing for domestic Patriot interceptor manufacturing. Patriot systems are among Ukraine's most valuable defenses against Russian ballistic missiles. Kyiv has repeatedly argued that it needs more launchers and far more interceptors to protect cities, energy sites, and military facilities. But the obstacles are enormous. Ukraine would need secure factories, expertise, machinery, supply chains, and sensitive components. Any production site could become a high-priority Russian target. Zelensky has also acknowledged that domestic production could take more than a year. Trump supported the idea but said company discussions were incomplete. The political agreement advances the plan, while major technical and commercial details remain unresolved. So why is this important? Because it could mark a shift from emergency weapons transfers toward long-term Ukrainian defense production. Instead of waiting for each new shipment from Western stockpiles, Kyiv wants the ability to build critical weapons itself. That could eventually transform Ukraine from a permanent recipient into a larger defense producer. But before that future arrives, Ukraine must survive the attacks coming now. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. The Patriot Agreement offers long-term hope, but Ukraine faces an immediate crisis. Russian attacks continue across Kyiv, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and elsewhere, killing and injuring civilians and damaging homes and infrastructure. Ukraine reports intercepting many incoming drones, but some missiles and unmanned aircraft still reach their targets. This creates a dangerous gap. Ukraine may eventually produce interceptors under an American license. But until production begins, it must depend on existing launchers, limited missile supplies, and deliveries from allies. Every Patriot interceptor used today is one fewer available for the next attack. At the same time, Russia can launch cheaper drones in large numbers, forcing Ukraine to decide which threats require its most expensive defensive weapons. That is why Kyiv also wants layered air defense, cheaper systems for drones, medium-range systems for cruise missiles, Patriots reserved for the most dangerous ballistic threats. Washington and Kyiv are also discussing Ukrainian drone technology. Ukraine seeks American systems, while the United States studies technology shaped by battlefield experience. But Moscow is unlikely to watch this cooperation quietly. Russian officials have criticized the Patriot plan and warned against deeper Western involvement. And the more Ukraine attacks Russian energy infrastructure, the stronger Moscow's argument becomes that it must expand military operations and intensify retaliation. So, is the Kremlin now under enough pressure to negotiate? There is no clear evidence of that yet. Peace efforts remain stalled. Russia demands territorial and political concessions Ukraine rejects, while Moscow says attacks will not change its military goals. This is the contradiction at the center of the war. Ukraine believes greater pressure can raise the cost of Russian aggression. Russia argues that greater pressure justifies a broader response. Both sides present escalation as a way to gain leverage. For Putin, the strikes challenge the image that Russia can wage war while protecting its own infrastructure. For Zelensky, they prove Ukraine can still reach valuable targets. For Trump, the Patriot plan supports Kyiv without promising unlimited transfers from American inventories. But none of this guarantees peace. The short-term result could be the opposite. Ukraine may expand energy attacks. Russia may intensify strikes on cities and drone factories. Both may seek stronger positions before compromise. The burning tankers are not an isolated event. They are part of a widening contest over who can sustain the war longer, protect critical infrastructure, and impose the greater cost. Now watch three things. First, watch whether Ukraine continues striking Russian-linked tankers, ports, depots, and refineries at this pace. One successful wave creates headlines. A sustained campaign can change routes, logistics, insurance, and military planning. Second, watch the details of the Patriot license. Which interceptor can Ukraine produce? Where? With whose components? Under what protection? And how soon? Until those questions are answered, the agreement remains strategically important but operationally incomplete. Third, watch Russia's retaliation. Moscow often answers long-range strikes with large aerial attacks. An expanded energy campaign could trigger attempts to overwhelm Ukraine before new Patriot capacity arrives. That is the race now unfolding. Ukraine is trying to damage the fuel network supporting Russia's war. Russia is trying to exhaust Ukraine's defenses and break its cities. The United States is opening a path that could eventually give Kyiv a domestic supply of advanced interceptors. The images are dramatic: burning tankers, drones racing across the sea, and Patriot missiles moving closer to Ukrainian production. But the reality is more sobering. This is not proof that the war is ending. It is evidence that both sides are preparing to sustain it under even greater pressure. Ukraine has taken the battle to Russia's oil network. Trump has opened the door to Patriot production, and Putin now faces a war reaching deeper into the infrastructure built to support it. The next question is not whether Russia will respond. It is how far that response will go. Subscribe for the next verified update, comment whether the Patriot Agreement changes the balance, and watch our next report for the latest battlefield developments.